Hello, you're listening to the abridged version of Book Shambles. If you'd like to hear the full-length version of Book Shambles and also get loads of other extra treats and bits and pieces, then why not go to patreon.com/bookshambles. Anyway, here's the abridged version with loads of really interesting things that were cut out. I mean, there's lots of interesting things you're still going to hear, but some of the things you're missing out on.
Hello, producer Trent here. Welcome to another episode of Book Shambles. Today's episode was recorded live online and streamed live online as part of the More Than Words Literary Festival in association with the Curzon Cinema a few weeks ago now. So you may have bought a ticket and watched that online. If you did, thanks very much for tuning in. If you didn't, then you can enjoy the episode today. Our guest is The Room Next Door's Michael Spicer, chatting about coming up with that comedy character and then the subsequent book, The Secret Political Advisor, which is out now. Remember, you can hear an extended edition of this episode and each and every episode by subscribing on Patreon, patreon.com/bookshambles. You'll also get access to Tips for Existence and An Uncanny Hour, our Patreon-exclusive podcast series. On their current guest on Tips for Existence, which is out tomorrow, is Professor Anil Seth. And then next week, we're talking to A.L. Kennedy. This abridged version of the podcast will always be available free, but if you are listening to it free and you're not subscribing on Patreon, that is obviously perfectly fine. But if you could go to Apple Podcasts and rate and review 5 stars, that would really help us out as well as, tweeting about it and telling all your friends and, putting up banners outside your house and all that sort of stuff. Let's get on with the episode. Here's Robin and Josie and Michael.
Hello, welcome to the More Than Words Festival, a festival celebrating the heavy metal ballads of the band Extreme. It's not that. Hello, I'm Robin Ince, and I normally do a podcast called Book Shambles. I'm actually sat in a hotel. I'm currently in Cheltenham doing the Cheltenham Science Festival. So, Michael, who's our guest today, was uncertain because he was thinking, wow, Robin owns a house that has both tea and coffee making facilities and a television on the wall, but tragically my reality doesn't have such things. And I'm joined by Josie Long.
Hello, I'm Josie Long. I'm in my flat, but I am going to shock you. I have 100 Biscoff biscuits that I lay out for myself every morning. No, I don't. But if I did, it would be very good.
All you have, as far as I remember, was one little bit of shortbread, and I was very disappointed. And sometimes a tin of biscuits, which are all open at a B&B, which you don't trust. Have you ever had that?
Yeah, I have. But I quite like that in a B&B. There's a B&B in Bristol that I've stayed at a few times that is an incredibly posh person's house in Clifton. And they have a little tiny glass of sherry with a little bit of cling film over it, a little tiny piece of fruit cake with a little cling film over it. And every time I think, I wonder how long this has been here, but I'm going to eat it straight away.
No, individuals is fine. It's when there's a collection of biscuits, you get a sense of rummaging. Whereas that has a very clean sense of cake and a clean sense of sherry, I think.
You see, to me, it's... When did we put this? Was it last week? When did we refresh the sherries, you think?
We're joined by Michael Spicer, who's just been doing such we're going to talk about your new book, but before we get with the first book, I think it is your first book, isn't it? Secret Political Advisor.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
But let's first of all just to get some, because is it 2 years or is it more than 2 years that you've basically been doing the character? Because I remember it seemed to us as viewers the speed in which it appeared to come from nowhere and suddenly be something that everyone was saying, you must watch this. How long was it actually for you?
It was coming up to 2 years. So Boris Johnson was running for Conservative Party leadership candidate. He was the candidate, and he was doing the rounds, and so he was basically doing these ridiculously long interviews where they would cover absolutely everything. And then, of course, he was asked right at the end what he likes to do in his spare time, and he didn't know because he's not a human being, and he didn't know how to respond to that in the correct way.
Well, also, he couldn't say shagging, which is all he
Well, I get the feeling that he was really close to like saying the truth, and then he kind of held back, which is why there's like a massive gap where he doesn't say anything except and ah.
So was that the bus one?
And then,
was that the one that became the
Yeah,
bus?
so he said, I make crates, I make buses. I'm sorry about that. I'm making buses from model crates. I still don't know if that's true. It seems like a terribly made up lie on the hoof.
yeah. There was a lot of conspiracy chat about it, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Because they were like, now when you look up Boris Johnson buses, it doesn't show the lies, it shows the bus.
I got that as well, and I thought, in what realm do you think Boris Johnson knows a single thing about Google algorithms? Honestly, it's such a stretch, isn't it?
Yeah, it is for him. I feel with him that he's somebody who everything is at surface level.
Absolutely.
He's never ever... He's not a man who's ever finished a non-fiction book.
No.
He's done the introduction, he's been like, I get it,
Yes.
I get it.
According to quite a few
Yes,
rumours, that includes the ones he's written.
Indeed.
Well, to be fair, if I was him, I'd want to disavow myself from my
Yeah,
books,
apparently
you
they
know,
are.
like
I mean,
the
I've
things that are in them.
never read anything he's written, but I they always get such terrible reviews because of how badly written. I mean, his own speeches are terribly written. That's another thing I don't really get. Back in the days of, I don't know, Tony Blair, I guess, you used to get polished speeches that were probably not written by him at all. And now Boris Johnson was sent to the UN and was, making no sense at all about artificial intelligence, which he had no clue about anyway. I can't believe that an advisor didn't get in there somewhere and say, well, no, you can't say that because you're just going to be a laughingstock. So I don't know. He baffles me, and it baffles me.
So when did that start?
Yeah,
Because that's what I think. We were talking about this just before we started the show, which is I think what you've been doing is the perfect thing for this very bizarre time where the proximity to parody, that sense that this is some kind of, elaborate Chris Morris joke that's been going on now for a decade. But your thing was... You must find that sometimes very difficult, that bit of going, but this speech, is this already so insane? Is there a point sometimes where certain speeches and certain interviews, it becomes quite difficult due to the level of preposterousness?
Yes, and the interesting thing about that is that that point came at the very first one. So on my Twitter feed, this soundbite about the buses was just flowing down. It was just constant, and then I got the idea and I wrote it in my lunch hour, and then as I was driving home, I just thought, this is ridiculous. It's low hanging fruit. What would I bring to this that would kind of make it more absurd? It is absurd on its own. And the thing that changed my mind was the fact that I just had a bit of time in the evening. I had a bit of time, and I thought...
Listen, I've got nothing else on.
I've done the dishes. My children are asleep. I've got an hour. I'll just put some box files up on my coffee table and do it. So it was always there at the beginning, that kind of nagging doubt that satire had been, if not killed, but very badly injured by Boris Johnson and Donald Trump. But what I'm doing is reacting to what they're saying. Yeah. That's the difference, rather than parodying in a spit image way.
Yes, I think that's exactly it. To me, because you're not having to write a speech that is equally as... You're literally getting to be... It's sort of showing them as ridiculous. And I think it's so important to, put them into a ridiculous sphere, but also put you into that ridiculous sphere. I think it does something really sad and important and funny.
Yeah, when these sound bites are put out and by the news agencies, they still have to be impartial. So they'll just kind of put the video out on their social media feeds and say, well, this is what he said today. Leave it at that, all right? And just leave it at that. And kind of everyone else has to muscle in and say, well, this is ridiculous, isn't it? And I guess there just wasn't anyone around at that time who was highlighting it in the way that I was, because I think, essentially I am just a man sat on a sofa yelling at the television screen, which is what so many other people were doing at the same time. And I guess that is the reason why it chimed with so many people. But I didn't know that when I did it. I hadn't a clue. It was all very accidental.
But I think that's why, because it is, as you said, the what you play apoplectic very well. And that's one of the things that you have to, and I can see it not being as good done by other people, and that's that bit of, and I think as you just said, it's that sense that many people have of I literally don't understand, and that's what we've reached a point in politics. Firstly, because we have so much politics that we because of the way social media is, because of the way that you can, watch the House of Commons, etc., and rolling news. Yeah, you are going. Before we could be a little bit apoplectic at the news at 10. And then there will be a repeat of the professionals or whatever. Now there's more, and now there's question time, and there's Priti Patel again, and so it is a point where it feels like the only reaction is just to be, as you said, to be screaming, going, I don't know what. All control seems to have been lost.
Yes, just mentioning the news at 10, it makes me feel like fuzzy. that kind of warm glow.
I know, it's so old school.
of only having the news at certain points in your life during the day. Sometimes not at all. So yes, I think you're right. I think that it's unhealthy, I guess, for a human being to just constantly be consuming news and whatever's coming out of their Twitter feed. People. Of course, that's there are always those moments where if you're on Twitter, you go, I literally can't deal with any of this today. Not a single thing. I need 24 hours without it. Like, for instance, my wife's not on Twitter. And the other day, I was talking, I hate to even bring up his name, but I was talking about Lawrence Fox with my agent. And we were talking about how it is just basically this kind of Twitter universe that is talking about him, lifting him up, putting him up on that pedestal, clicking on his links, reading his articles. And I turned to my wife and I said, do you know who Lawrence Fox is? And she said, no. I don't know who she is.
To live that life.
And I thought, there she's right there. That's what I want.
Yeah. Oh, God, there's so many...
Hello, sorry to disturb the conversation. Just to say, you are listening to the abridged version of Josie and Robin's Book Shambles. If you'd like to hear the full version, then you can support us via Patreon and get all of the other bits of tittle-tattle that dropped out of our mouth. No, I was just going to say, but the right, I think for the time being, certainly in the US and in the UK, are saying utterly preposterous. They have increasingly detached themselves from evidence-based thinking. So you see...
And they're insincere.
Well, you see an ideology which is very much that the audience that they're playing to is one that is rejecting intelligence. And I don't mean that in a facetious way. I mean literally going, how can you say that? How can you reach that conclusion? Oh, by ignoring everything that has been found out through research, through the scientific method, through all those other things. So undoubtedly there's going to be more fodder there because it is a very Fox News. It is a very, what's his name, Bill O'Reilly. That used to be that horrible thing of watching Bill O'Reilly, and then eventually you couldn't watch it anymore because you knew it wasn't just preposterous; it was something being watched by millions of people.
Yes, I think that kind of propaganda it won't go because Trump's gone. I mean, I've got a horrible snagging feeling that it's just lying in wait and will come back again because I think it's been established now. That kind of thinking. I don't know if you can just eradicate it with 4 years of Joe Biden. I think that I don't know whether it will get worse, but I think there's a possibility that. I mean, we've got I hate mentioning things that I've got no interest in, or or don't want to give them the oxygen of publicity, or as Linda Smith said, the oxygen of oxygen. But GB News, this is a slippery slope we're going down here, and I don't see it being reversed.
I feel like it's a real cliff. I don't feel like it's a slope. I feel like it's just a big jump into the deep end. And I think it is frightening. It is. But I feel like the last 5 years have been that, it's been the right-wing press getting away with whatever they want, and it not being, there not being a real way to escape it. So I feel really glad and grateful when people do kind of mock it. I
was going to say, just that idea that satire, or whatever you want to call it, or current affair, political comedy, is meant to change. A lot of what it's about is, I think, it's about making people just go, I feel desperate. And then I saw, and now
I'm
there's
not
lots
alone.
And when you watch,
Yes.
including the great one, Jeremy Hardy, and all those, part of the joy of it was not that you go, and it was really amazing because Jeremy played Salisbury, and then that seat went to someone. It was the fact that everyone went, "Oh, good!" I remember playing, where was it, Burnley? I forget what that venue's called, Burnley Mechanics. And Burnley is quite a tough town with quite a lot of certainly at the time I was playing there, and far right stuff going. And however many people were in that room, the conversations afterwards, it was just that bit of going, "Oh, good, you live around here as well," because I feel alone, and I feel
Right,
and I
okay.
think that plays that's a really important thing, which is if you suppress all of those things, then everyone ends up just feeling alone, and that bit where people can watch going, "I'm apoplectic about that too," and in the town I live in, I think I'm the only one.
It's like Alone in Berlin, isn't it? I think of that book all the time about, and he says everyone is struggling, and in the book, nobody knows that other people feel dissenting towards the government because nobody can communicate that without fear of imprisonment. And
I think also
I just was reminded of the book.
that this added story that's playing in all of our lives of the pandemic and the lockdown making people feel even more detached than they were before. I mean, I do get, people tweeting to say, "You got me through it." Not necessarily just me, but you know what I mean? The sort of batch of comedians that were making stuff online at home.
That's so
which is
nice.
great. Yeah, really good.
That's the bit of comedy that gets very often when you have these people who all of these very often false culture war conversations about comedy has always been about hate and saying really awful, and you go, no, some of it's about people actually genuinely feeling happier about their life at the end. Some of it is some of it is actually about hope, and it is all the best comedy ever was everyone was really angry afterwards, and no one was happy, and everyone hated each other, and they burnt down their neighbour's house.
They explain Morecambe and Wise and Ken Dodd. Do you know what I
Morecambe
mean?
and Wise hated
could not make
Des
that
O'Connor.
argument.
They destroyed Andre Brevin.
Also, have you seen Laurel and Hardy attack that guy's house with the Christmas trees? Oh my goodness. Unbelievable.
Listen, they're pushing boundaries. Sorry, you're offended. Sorry, the train was offended by Buster Keaton. He just wanted to fuck about on it. Yes, that's God. Yeah, that's so true. And I think it's so that's where I feel very glad to be a comedian as opposed to a straight political commentator, because you're never ever going to be in a position where you're just doing something daft to help make the day go quicker.
Yeah, it's funny actually when I see videos of the current leader of the Labour Party talking about,
I love that you're who I shall not name.
Well, that says a lot. He named Lawrence Fox, but he won't name the other.
Yes, that's true, isn't it? I also named Laurel and Hardy, so I like to think. Oh, you know what I mean.
Yeah, sure.
He just seems so unengaging.
Oh, he's a charisma vacuum. I'm sorry to anyone that loves him, although I don't know a single soul that does. But I find him a charisma vacuum. I find him sort of...
Yeah, at least throw a joke in there or something. Show that you're a human being. It's such a huge problem with politicians. It always has been, really. And then the worst thing is, when you get people like Ed Miliband, who stop being a politician and then suddenly become human and start telling jokes and being emotional. And you go, I would have really loved if you'd have kind of done that earlier.
But I think that's why people fall for people like Trump, or why some people do, because they're like, well, this guy, he, at the very least you can say, he's not a regular politician.
Yes.
And it's like, yeah, he's unhinged. Yes, but he's talking about McDonald's.
Yeah.
Like,
that is part of the reason why he did so well. But that, you know, I just don't understand how, you know, politicians coming along now can feel that they're talking to, you know, people like you and me. Are they they're just not communicating. So, you know, I find that a major issue. I feel like that there need to be passionate and clear speaking human beings. Because the weird thing is that you can ask a politician anything and they will just say exactly the same thing. They will just say whatever's been written for them. They will construct a sentence that has no full stop, just wanders around, brings up stats that nobody is interested in. If there was just a human being on that platform that would come along, I would jump for joy. But the fact is that there isn't anyone like that, and I, as a comedian, can just lampoon this because it's not a world that any of us inhabit.
But has that? I was wondering whether there's certain people that, because you've ended up spending time watching them and you have this interaction that you've created, has that actually changed any of your sense of who any of them are, or are they also this strange manufactured thing that you don't?
That's interesting because as I say, I've done Matt Hancock 4 times. But when the general election was going on, he was doing these weird videos where he would say, it's 7 o'clock in the morning and I'm in Basildon. It's great to be here. I've got my coffee with me. I'm ready to go. I've got this thing coming up. I've got that thing coming up. Let's go. And it would always be, really insincere. He's got, as I say, he's got a real sort of serial killer vibe when he looks right down the lens, like he's looking through your soul. So, again, on my lunch break, because my lunch breaks were spent doing things like this when I had a real job, I got in my car and I just, you know, did the same sort of thing. You know, hello, I've got my coffee with me. I'm meeting some doctors today, and I'm going to tell them we're raising 50%, so that's good. You know, so just, you know, but no substance at all, and it did really well. And then lo and behold, Matt Hancock starts following me. Okay, so
that's when they think they can be in on the joke.
That is the thing. If I'm sure that Matt Hancock phoned Spitting Image and said, "Can I have my puppet?" You know. I think he's just one of those, like he's got the worst cartoons, the worst political cartoons. He's probably got framed in his study.
He's just happy to be included, isn't
exactly that. And I think there's a certain element of it's just a laugh, it's just a game. Because when he was going all over the UK during the election. And I've mentioned this before, he was standing on the docks somewhere and looking out with his lapels up. He had a big coat on with his lapels up, looking out like that. And it just said, and he tweeted that picture of himself, and it just said, "Contemplating the Union." And straight away, people kind of turned it into Smith's album covers and stuff like that, turning it into a meme. And I think that's what he wanted. That is exactly what he wanted. He wanted to constantly be talked about, to be a meme. And I just thought, you're literally in charge of the NHS. Can you take this seriously?
Yeah. You need
So
to do
he
that
continues
Martin
to follow
Rowson
me.
thing, don't you? Where, Martin's cartoons, where you can't imagine there are as many MPs going, I wonder if I could buy that cartoon where you've drawn me as a leprous cock covered in dog shit. There's a kind of...
Yeah. Well,
That reminded me, there's a guy who makes videos as a Tory MP called Michael Lavash. Have you seen it? What's his name? Rob, I think. I can't remember his surname. I'm so frustrated. But you should check him out. He's very, very fun. And the character he plays reminds me a bit of Matt Hancock. He's just a desperate guy who keeps ruining everything and keeps fucking up and getting in trouble.
yeah,
and he's really
the
great.
weird thing about Matt Hancock is that he seems, when he goes on the news, seems terribly unprepared. And yet at the same time, kind of corrupt enough to have these NHS contracts.
Mm-hmm.
There's this, it's almost like it's inbuilt. Like he's been born with something in his DNA to be corrupt, and yet also his usual clumsy self.
Well, I think it's about what matters to them as well. To me, what matters to these people is the grift. It's making as much money for themselves and their friends and protecting the interests of the wealthy. What does not matter to them, really, is the general public or anything to do with them. So it's like shows their priorities.
It doesn't make any sense when he's trying to show compassion or clapping for the carers. It just seems so false when he does it. It's like he didn't go to the acting lessons that day.
But he has something, doesn't he, which is, you can't imagine that he has, as you were saying, that kind of level of guile, because he looks like, oh, poor old Matt. I mean, dude, he's been elevated above the position he should have had.
Yes.
And that in itself, that's the confusing thing, I think, as both of you mentioned before, which is very often we imagine there's an insidious plan. And I remember Naomi Klein writing about this in The Shock Doctrine, saying one of the things is that we imagine there's this Illuminati that have planned wars, etc. But more often than not, it's just things go wrong, and then they're the ones who go, oh, brilliant, we can feast on this. But it's nothing about... It's not about a carefully honed plan. It's just the moment something collapses, they're the first ones to go, oh, yeah, I'll grab that, because that morality which is replaced instead by monetisation is the first thing that occurs to them.
Yeah, and yet the hoaxers and the anti-vaxxers think it's a much more well-structured plan of attack, And it isn't. It's as you say. It's just a chaotic feasting on the carcass.
I love it's Fintan O'Toole. I don't know if you ever read any of his stuff. He's a really great writer. He wrote a fantastic book called Heroic Failure, which is all about Brexit and the UK and the UK's attitude to itself and how it believes it. And I think he came up with the word pseudo-populism to describe both the US and the UK at that particular time. And I think pseudo-populism seems to really have... It seems to attach itself to exactly what we've been watching with COVID as well, which is, people say, everything must be opened up now, we've had enough, and don't wear your mask. Well, hang on, no, you've got to work out. It's like, when what's his name, Mark Dolan was on his radio programme, and he cut up a mask because he said he was so
embarrassing.
He was doing it because there are people who aren't getting their cancer treatment, and you go, well, it's a terrible thing, that's right, but you cutting up the mask is exactly the opposite gesture of what is required if we want a more fully functioning NHS in this scenario.
Yeah, but again, that goes back to what we were saying about this being a showman for the right wing news. I mean, really, cutting up. I was embarrassed for him.
Yeah, and also there's no joy in that life.
Oh God.
You'd never get to do a show where you're like, and today's episode of GB News or the Hard Talk is just about all the different flowers I love. Here's a date. You never get to do something sweet or light-hearted in your life.
Well, I mean,
just the outrage cycle.
Because that's what attracts people. That's what gets people phoning up, all frothy mouthed, going, blah, 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 blah. This is my agenda. This is my argument, blah, blah, blah. And if you want to listen to that every single day, fair enough, go ahead. But please don't let it spill over into my world, because it's just so unhealthy.
Well, we must ask about, because otherwise Canongate will be furious about your book, The Secret Political Advisor, which is must have been. I mean, in terms of how you, I wanted to know the difference between your writing style, or if you found a difference, that bit of going, right, so now I'm reacting off this, and this, which is you're creating a full world, which kind of starts at the end of Cameron, and then takes us through lots of different bits of that narrative as you try and advise these different people, Dominic Cummings, etc. How hard was that when you go, right, this is... Or were you very often just watching lots of speeches at the time and going, right, I know the audience aren't going to see this, but I think I can still feed off this in a similar way?
It's interesting, because I must admit I didn't really see my character being a book. And when Canongate said, "Would you like to do it?" that's when my mind started racing, and then I thought about what the organisation is that he works for. That they would be just an apolitical, just a kind of organisation providing advice and guidance and making sure they don't look stupid in front of camera. And then it becomes then the organisation is sort of maybe larger than that and starts dictating the agenda. So I had fun with kind of working out who he is, really. I mean, I still don't even know his name. Because he was just this sketch character, this 2-minute 20 video on Twitter occasionally. But when I started mapping it out, I realised that if I went back to when Cameron left, then that would be a good launching pad, because then I could encompass Theresa May's disastrous time, and then Brexit, and then Trump. So I thought the most interesting thing, and I suppose I was also thinking about The Thick of It's comedy book at that time, which is made out to look like a dossier, a misplaced dossier. It's got like a stamp, "Lost Property of Euston Station" on the front. So I thought, if we just infiltrate this man's world and get into his texts and his emails and read his memos and stuff like that, his WhatsApp, then you could sort of piece together what his life is like, and just basically the 4 years that I cover. It is just the 4 years when virtually everything fell apart, and that moment. I mean, in one of the sketches where Boris Johnson holds up the kipper, I do take my headphones off and say, "Am I in a dream or something? Why are people clapping Why are people clapping food poisoning? What on earth is going on?" And so it is trying to capture that moment, that him at the centre of that storm.
And how did it feel to really broaden out your own sort of personal fictional universe?
Well, great, Josie, because I've written stories and written scripts and all sorts of things since I was 17. I had a job up until 2019. So all the time I was in regular work, 9-to-5 work, I was doing, scripts and sketches on the side. So getting the chance to flesh out anything, to expand any universe, was just an amazing thing, to just be able to quit my job and go, right, this is it now. This is it full time. I'm going to write characters and I'm going to get paid for it. Amazing. So yeah, when I was 17, I was sending scripts off to the BBC and anxiously waiting. I actually went to an open writers' room for week ending. And, I was very shy, so I took my sister, and the place was just full of really unhappy men.
Welcome to comedy.
Yeah, it was. But I was 17, and I thought, oh, okay. I thought it would be a bit more glitzy, but maybe not.
That's how I felt when I started gigging. I was like, wow, everyone here's like 30 and they're talking about Star Wars in a sad way.
Well, the thing about weekending is that they said, right, well, this week Margaret Thatcher's gone to a summit, so we want some stuff on that, please. And everybody's like got their notepads. It's like, yeah, right. And I kind of went away with my sister and I said, yeah, I don't really think topical comedy is for me. And
your sister became script editor of Weekending, of course, for the next
Script
5 years.
editor,
It was
script
very
editor.
successful. But that's interesting because I only ever went to one meeting as well, which had been a few years before you. Because I almost thought it wasn't going by the time you. And it was such an. I went once, and I remember Sinead O'Connor had done something, and it wasn't the time that she tore up the picture of the Pope, but it was something similar. And the advice was to come up with jokes that were kind of having a go at Sinead O'Connor. And I remember just thinking, I think the Catholic Church is much... You know that moment where you go...
Right.
In the same way as, having worked on the 11 o'clock show, where you go, I'm really not sure whether, Liverpool itself is the mainly problematic thing that's going on with society now. I think actually there might be some... And that's an interesting thing, isn't it? With a lot of sometimes the more mainstream satire, certainly... if you want to call it satire, current affairs comedy or whatever, you go, that's the wrong person to be attacking. Or I always found it very uneasy.
Yeah, this is it, sympathising with power.
But I don't understand the notion of being balanced if one half is insane.
I literally have been
and
trying to
bigoted.
write stand-up about this, where it's like, and now we're going to have this expert talking about the events and their consequences. And now for balance, here's some cunt who's completely wrong. Great. It's like, what? Who
Hang on, Josie, that's my joke. I should do that on Monkey Cage.
Did you?
You've just ripped me off. I knew you'd always been ripping me off.
Oh, you should. I've also
To be honest, mine wasn't as edgy as yours. Mine was merely, and now someone who's wrong. Whereas I think you've really taken it up to a Lenny Bruce level now.
Do you know what I think as well? I think it's the refusal to be honest about when people are immoral. It's like no one wants to ever pretend that they might have a moral position. They want to be like, no, come on, we're debating the issues. And it's like, yes, but in some instances, their position is immoral or cruel. And it should be, like, I don't want to sound like a heavy-handed, a bishop or something. But, like, somebody should be pointing out that things are
Also, there is
and
balance,
cruel.
and it's not you that has to do it. It's the spectator that's doing the balance, and it's all of those other things. It's Rod Liddell's next column. And that's always the bit that seems to be the problem, which is you go, no. If you can then show me going, oh, no, I mean, the good thing about the spectator is halfway through Rod Liddell's column, he then writes it in totally the opposite way or whatever. That's not what happens. And that's not what happens with all of those people.
Yes, that's so
but
true.
For some reason, and so balance is a much bigger thing than an individual show or a single comedy character. It's the whole society that you're in.
I think balance is overrated. I think we should prioritise lopsidedness.
Totally. But also, like, I would rather be able to listen to somebody who has a viewpoint, knowing they have a viewpoint, and then think about it. It's so much better.
I mean, it does go back to Spitting Image again. I don't want to criticise Spitting Image because I didn't watch it. But,
that's not going to stop me.
No, that's fine. When you consider everything that was going on, say, like a year ago with Trump being impeached, corruption upon corruption in this country, with the Leave campaign and all the stuff that still hasn't been properly pulled apart. Spitting Image decided to do a 4-minute bit about Greta Thunberg. And it felt like it was like they had to do it. And I find all of that so tedious. I really do.
Well, again, people saying, oh, if you're attacking the Tories, you should be attacking Labour. And I just feel like when Labour are in power and making the laws, then, and that was why, so much of the press fixation on I've even, we've seen it with the pandemic, holding Jeremy Corbyn to account over the pandemic. It's like, guys, he is not the one who was making the laws. If you would like to focus on the people who are doing the things that materially affect us right now, it would be much more useful.
Who did you? Because we're nearly at the end now, and I wanted just to ask about when you were saying when you were 17. You've obviously been, like all three of us, a comedy fan from a very early age, and I was, when I was reading
big
your book,
nerd.
Yeah, a big nerd.
Huge.
I presume you
nerd,
probably have eczema and you wear bad woolens. Welcome to our world.
Oh, Robin, I do. How did you know that?
Do you know what it is? It's one of the great things, isn't it? Which is, there are some people who they get to the age of 25 and they go, "Still, my skin accepts my body, and therefore I can never be a writer." Whereas, there are those who go, "I'm now moving towards the Dennis Potter part of my life."
I was going to say the Dennis Potter route.
Yeah. And at this point now, we merely mime to a song from 1932 about a teddy bear's picnic.
Oh, the annoying thing is it's cleared up.
Oh,
I have to admit, I did
like
feel your work's got weaker.
Ironically.
And my work's got weaker.
But I was, reading your book. I thought of you mentioned Thick of It, and then obviously there's things like the Time Waster letters and Henry Root, which I think to me still play into that kind of narrative of the way that and also the Bastard file, the Alan Bastard file. So what were when you were a kid and those kind of things, that excitement of the new book that was available? What are the comedy books that you loved?
Oh well, I think. The thing is, when I was growing up, so I was like a child of the 80s, so I guess television still completely dominated my outlook. And I don't remember holding any particular book close, like I never read a book over and over again. But the BBC repeated... this is dreadfully predictable, isn't it? But they repeated Monty Python in 1987 when I was 10, and my parents let me stay up because it was on Saturday nights after Match of the Day, so I stayed up to like 11 o'clock at night to watch it because they knew how much I loved it. And then we got the Big Red Book, the Monty Python Big Red Book, which, I replicated in Sketchpads. Essentially, I had this notion that I would become a comedian and reunite them, and we'd do I know it's terrible, isn't it? But I was 10.
No, it's very sweet.
I was 10, so. So I would write my
I used to do
and stuff like that.
Yeah, I used to do Red Dwarf cartoons where I would join the cast of Red Dwarf at that age. So I feel like it's very normal. That's beautiful, and I think the series as well. My dad used to videotape the series and would let us watch it on video. Like when I woke up at 6 a.m. and couldn't sleep, I would get to watch Monty Python video. And I feel really grateful that they did repeat it, because if they hadn't, I probably wouldn't have fallen in love with it.
Well, the comedians before me who didn't have like VHS, for instance, who had to rely on Monty Python's comedy albums, for instance, that was the only thing they had. I remember Steve Martin saying he thought that they were a band because he only knew about the albums. He thought they were some kind of comedy band, like the Bonzo Dog Doodah band. He didn't realise until later on that they had this series. But I was lucky enough to have a little Ferguson video star that I could record everything on and watch endlessly. But yes, the comedy tie-in books I loved, and whenever there was a comedy show, I would seek out the tie-in book, basically.
Oh, I love that's what I was really. Don't think I was going. I hope he says something Victorian. I really was thinking. I remember the utterly comic relief book with all its stuff in it, and it's interesting when you mention albums as well, because that to me was such an important thing. Listening to the Matching Tie and Handkerchief set, the Holy Grail album. I actually used in my A level when I was writing about King Lear. The reason I remembered, "'Tis this the king? Aye, every inch a king. When I who dare see how my subject quake, I pardon that." All of that comes from the fact they play that in the middle of, I think, the Holy Grail album, and that's one of those. It's an odd thing, isn't it? Because sometimes we do talk about the fact that culture has changed because those surreptitious things, those things that were hard to find. But I think still the internet probably plays, even though we might go, it's not the same, kids. I think probably their excitement that they have of finding people doing things like the stuff you do and a lot of the other stuff that we love, or suddenly seeing like Too Many Cooks, which I'm sure you've seen Too Many Cooks.
Oh God, yeah.
Which is a masterpiece. It's one of those bits where it's just that it's properly art house.
If you played that on a big screen at the Tate Modern, it would win the Turner Prize. It's an amazing masterpiece.
That's what's so interesting.
I actually did put it on the big screen when I first saw it. I was doing a gig down in was it Lewisham? I can't remember. I was playing a library theatre on a library theatre at Canada Water, and I showed it to my mate Grace Petrie, and I went, before we go on, I'm just going to say, hey everyone, before we start the show, it's only 10 to 8. I'm just going to show you a thing that's brilliant. I had to
there should be more of that. I remember when YouTube first came out, we would have like YouTube parties where we'd be like, have you seen this one? And now I feel like that doesn't really happen.
Yeah. They've got over 20 things on YouTube. It's amazing.
Yes. But there was, I think the YouTube started as just like, YouTube was You've Been Framed.
Yeah.
First. It was just You've Been Framed. It was people falling over and,
it was people being like, we better put that on YouTube.
Yeah, put it on YouTube because Jeremy Beadle is dead now. So YouTube is all we've got. But then, suddenly overnight, it became the Everything in the World website.
Yeah.
I don't know when that happened, probably about 2008 or something like that.
That's like Amazon, though.
Yes, true enough.
Sorry, that's not actually as good a point as I thought. I was like, wow, I've cracked it. I've cracked the world.
That was great, because I actually saw it in your face. You said it, and then you went, oh, I don't know if we should end on that.
Yeah, that was useful. It wasn't useful. It wasn't useful.
Michael, thank you so much for joining us. And the Secret Political, is it out now? The Secret Political Advisor.
Yeah.
Can I ask about? Do you think about the future of this character? Like, do you have plans for them going into particular places?
Yeah, I've been working on something for a long time, which is just again expanding his universe and looking at the possibility of fleshing him out. I mean, there are people, there are commissioners, in fact, who have said, yes, I don't see the longevity in it. It's good for what it is, but I don't see it. But that's making me want to go, well, let me just prove that I am a storyteller rather than an online comedian. Let me prove that I'm capable of doing something with him. So I would really like to bring him to the small screen or the big screen for sure. That's
really cool. And like the longevity of it is, it's not like next year everything will be normal and good. Exactly
right. I mean, I don't want to keep telling, as I say, like with Matt Hancock, I don't want to keep telling the same joke because that's what he is. He is the same joke, isn't he? So, it's just about doing things slightly differently. Like, I scored highly with Nerds Like You and Me when I created this parallel universe, Room Next Door, that where he finds an evil version of himself via a portal in his attic. Things like that. I really enjoy doing because it just plays around with the form a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, everyone go and get Secret Political Advisor. It's very entertaining and it is cathartic as well because it, as Michael said, it covers those 4 years which are either leading to a steeper slope or a cliff, depending whether you're optimistic like Michael, who's just seeing a nice steep slope, fun on a toboggan, or whether a lemming like Josie Long, who sees this terrifying...
A cliff is an optimistic thing. Have you never done coast steering?
Oh, okay, fair enough. That I hope is a T-shirt. A cliff is an optimistic thing. Now, though, you've put in my mind the fact that Cliff Richard appeared in a musical based around Wuthering Heights called Heathcliff, and I can.
Oh, God.
I wish I don't know
I think
how
it only
you put that in my
lasted a
head.
couple of nights. Few
Now
nights, and
there's
then it
someone
was
whose
shut
career
down.
is inexplicable to me. I guess if I'd been around in the 50s, it would be
you missed
fine.
the first
but...
70 years. That was the trouble of his career. So that might have been one of the issues. Thank you very much to Curzon as well. And I'm sure they've got more things coming up with the More Than Words Festival as well. And it's got very dark now, hasn't it? I've got darker and darker.
Yeah,
I'm the one who it turned out with the... I do apologise, but I don't know how the lights turn on in this hotel room. You know, one of those ones
Well,
where
you
you
just
clap
remembered
and-
the very...
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
Thank
so much.
you.
Thanks
Thanks
for
a
having
lot.
us. Thanks for coming, Michael.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much for listening. Remember, you can hear an extended edition of this episode by subscribing at patreon.com/bookshambles. Michael's book, The Secret Political Advisor, is out now through Canongate. Get yourself a copy of that. Back next week with another new episode. Have a great week, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
This podcast is part of the Cosmic Shambles Network. Josie Robbins' Book Shambles was produced by Trent Burton of Trunkman Productions.